but I'll do this.
That's perfect. Love that. Okay, so I've started recording, so we're going to start the session right now. Yeah, so have fun, guys. Okay, so good morning and assalamu alaikum. Today marks our first lightning episode in eTable Talk with Sarah, a virtual panel discussion on bracing for impact, facing the turbulent economy. Yeah? So we are privileged to have the right industry panels today, leaders joining the session, and really appreciate their knowledge and contribution dedicated around, number one, economic turbulence, the period between now and end of 2021. Number two, protecting your future from collapsing, the strategy of the 21st century and AI. And number three would be thoughts on the hot speculation that we are, whether we are now in the bull market or are we diving deeper, yeah, to a financial Armageddon. So I'd like to first thank all three panelists for being here today. We have Derek Hendrikz, a master Orgtologist. We also have Brightwell Nkambule, Commissioner Modernization of eSwatini Revenue Authority, and Arvind Rampal, Principal and Founder of Performatize. So welcome, gentlemen.
Hi Sarah, hi everyone. Nice to be here.
Hello everybody, nice to be here.
Nice.
Hello everyone, good to be here.
Thank you, thank you. So just to start off with Derek, you founded the International Orgtology Institute, yeah, which regulates the practice of orgtology and researching scientific methods to work with the systems and dynamics within organizations. Just curious to know, what was the motivation to create such practice?
Sure, yeah, Sarah, the term orgtology is a combination of the words organization and the Greek word logy, meaning the science of organization. The reason I created it is when I did my MBA many years ago, I really couldn't find, it was just like they threw a lot of topics into this degree, and there was very little science, holistic science to this. In other words, there's not a big picture that binds everything together. If you do process engineering, people would go to the organogram and develop processes, but my belief has always been that an organization really just has one process. It has one vision, therefore there's one big project going on. That's the one side of it. The other side of it is that the current thinking in managerial science is very linear. People think in lines, so everything begins and ends, and therefore dichotomies are usually measured against each other as good and evil. So we would say management's not good, leadership is great. Everybody should be leaders. Or mission is how we get to vision. Vision is what we want to achieve, and mission is how we get there. So it's a very linear approach, where the orgtology approach is more dual approach. So we look at coexistence of concepts. So that same statement of mission and vision would, for instance, in orgtology be, purpose is who we are and intent is what we want to do with that. So it's the coexistence between an operational side in the organization that repeats the past and a strategic side of the organization that creates the future. We've been implementing this at a number of organizations over the last five years, and it's really working incredibly well, above expectations.
Thank you, Derek. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, now moving over to Brightwell. Brightwell, you are the Senior Commissioner, yeah, with eSwatini Revenue Authority. You are also in charge of transformation and modernization of the company. Could you share with our viewers, how long have you been in this journey?
Thank you, Sarah. I've been with this journey for 10 years now, unbelievable. It's been 10 years. Before this one, I was in telecom with a similar role, driving projects. So my experience with this role is that the deal breaker, really in transformation, the deal breaker is leadership. If the leadership understands the reason for the journey, it becomes easier, because the followers, as they are called followers, the followers follow the leaders. So if the leaders don't believe in the journey, the followers will not follow. But what is also interesting is that even if the leaders believe in the journey, they still have to work very hard to get the followers to follow. So we were very fortunate very, very early in our transformation journey to get to understand the concepts that Derek is talking about. You know, the concept that you know, we have to run the business and transform the business, because naturally human beings seek stability. You know, so processes seek to introduce that stability, that order. You know, but then you know, your strategy or your vision then seeks to destabilize the stability in order to position the organization for the future. So this is the sort of dichotomy that is talking about, but from a different angle of running the business and changing the business. You know, so our leaders have been in the forefront of working very hard to come up with tried and tested practices to stabilize our operations through the use of business processes, you know, and then, you know, seeking to transform our organization through the use of projects. So continuously, it's been a balancing act, balancing, stabilizing the organization and changing the business. And our observations is that those businesses that have seek stability without the injection of change have over time become irrelevant. And again, those organizations in environment that seek to continuously change in stable environment also tend to be chaotic. So it's like organizations have to strike the delicate balance between, you know, changing and maintaining stability. Thank you.
Thanks, Brightwell, for sharing that. Now, Arvind, you have been in the business intelligence sector, yeah, for the past decade. Your last corporate post, if I'm not wrong, it was as a managing director in Qatar Skills Academy.
Yeah.
Share with the viewers here, maybe, what was it like living and, you know, working in the Middle East?
Well, it was an interesting journey. You know, even prior transitioning to the Middle East and working in Qatar for about 3.5 years. Even before that, we were technically still servicing the Middle East industry and Asia Pacific as well. But when you move there and you actually embed yourself in a completely different culture, it's an entirely new experience. While I was there, it was interesting to see, because the Middle East is generally a place with in terms of the Gulf countries at least, with heavy capital injection. You know, it's a very how would I say inflated economy that you're looking at, you know, through oil money and gas money and things like that. And so the dynamics at play there in terms of how businesses operate is very different from a completely free market economy that you would see in Asia Pacific, or, you know, if a business here does not have the capital injection to run for a certain period of time, you know, the holding power, the staying power is very low, right? They will wind up in a couple of months, maybe half a year. But in the Middle East, that can go on for a long while. And that goes for all companies across the board there when they come from an oil-rich background. Now, unfortunately, this pandemic has really revealed a lot of inefficiencies in these systems, right? People would think an airline, you know, would and a national airline, for example, would be able to sustain irregardless. It would always be a blue chip holding company that people would say would be worthwhile investing in. And now what we've seen is, you know, this has completely turned the tables in terms of what we once thought to be stable industries, education, the same. And so I catch up with my Middle East clients, you know, fairly often. And just recently, I think a week ago, 2 weeks ago, I caught up with some of them, and they have never seen something like this before. They're completely unprepared for it. You know, it was a given assumption that things would remain status quo for a long while, and unfortunately, that is no more the case. So I'm seeing that transition happening right now in the Middle East, and of course in Asia Pacific as well.
Yeah, I remember having the interview discussion with Derek, and Derek mentioned that no MBA scholar has an answer towards what we are facing right now. Do you remember that, Derek? And,
yeah, very well.
Yeah, the situation is here to stay. You came back early last year, yeah, Arvind? And
Yeah.
continued the business journey on your own now.
Yes.
What are your thoughts in terms of helping the companies here, stay relevant during these turbulent times?
So when I came back, I set up a company called Performatize, right? So Performatize, I built the names out of the word performance and optimize, right? So essentially the mission is essentially to get companies to, optimize the performance to become better in every way to achieve their organizational goals. And throughout that journey has been an interesting one. So moving into a lot of consulting practice in support of, in addition to that, to supporting the consulting practice with training and coaching solutions that come with learning management systems and things like this. You said the key word there, Sarah. Staying relevant. And I think that's where even in terms of my discussions and collaborations with Derek, we've been always being back and forth and understanding the principles of his Orgtology system to keep companies to be relevant, to stay relevant. And that's really what has been my mission as well, in a way. And I think just now, so more than ever, that question is up in the air, I'll just give you a simple example. You said you spoke to, you had a chat with Derek, and you said that no MBA scholar has seen, something like this before. I'll just take a step back and say, forget MBA scholars. There are people who specialize in business continuity and disruption and scenario planning. And, there's this whole methodology along, I'm not so sure if you've heard VUCA, V-U-C-A. Volatility, uncertainty, complexity. I'm sure you've heard of this before. That entire field of VUCA really focuses on managing these kind of circumstances that a pandemic, would bring. And when we talk about volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, this is something that they were talking about before the pandemic hit. And this entire school of thought of strategy, used to look at things like scenario planning, sensing capabilities, keeping an eye out on disruption, and then trying to, bring in agile practice into a business. And, I'll tell you something. So I've been following this kind of methodology of thought, right, of people who specialize in this. And when the pandemic hits on this scale, there's no way they could see something like this. There's no way their remote sensing capabilities or the ability to watch market trends or look at data and things that can see something like this, And, so even, not even scholars, even the people who have been industry specialists that have just been, they eat, breathe, sleep this, are basically in a state of shock, And that's where, definitely a more resilient solution is required, basically.
Thanks, Arvind, for sharing that. Now, you're right. Look, to start off with, the world is not experiencing not yet a second wave, and it never got over the first one. And people just have to adapt to the current situation now, whatever methodologies they are placing this with. So it is entirely possible, though, for the second wave to happen. But if that does take place, then I think we're in a deeper negative effect here. So, on the 1st of February, when the day COVID-19 first appeared on our front covers, the World Health Organizations counted about 2015 new cases. And then on fast forwarding to June, its daily tally reached about 190,000. Which is alarming. So really, all hands are on deck here. All companies, all owners, they are all hands-on in terms of running their business. So let's have the first round of questions here. Let's have Derek, the organizational scientist, start on the first round here. Yeah. Now, Derek, what is your perspective on this pandemic? What does the future hold for us?
Yeah, Sarah, I wish I could answer that. I mean, we don't know. It's all right. First, I think that what we need to understand is what the concept of normal. What is normal? So in Orgtology, we see normal as an internalized process, It's something which people continue repeating to the point where it becomes part of their day-to-day world. For instance, in South Africa, it's normal to just wake up and go and make breakfast, but if you've lived in the North Pole, then it would be a whole another procedure. You wouldn't just be able to get up and make breakfast. There's temperature to deal with, which is most humans won't be able to deal with. So to normalize a situation means that you have to get used to environment, and you have to build processes inside that environment. So I think the pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic, is something that will definitely have immense repercussions on the world of business and economics and day-to-day functioning. I think even if the virus is contained and if we have a vaccine, we will only begin to deal with the problems of COVID-19. I mean, just the practical thing of vaccinating 7 billion people. If you start counting today without sleeping, it would take you in the vicinity of 31 years to count to 1 billion. That's how much a billion is. So to vaccinate 7 billion people could literally take up to 5 to 6 years with current capacity. Then we haven't even started speaking about the political, economical, social, psychological, legal, environmental effects of this. The psychological effect is immense. The economic effect is going to be immense. It's already showing. I mean, in South Africa, millions of people have lost their jobs. Companies. The other thing that we have to recognize here is that when something like this happens, when a virus like this, when a pandemic like this, or any crisis takes place, the bigger the scale of the crisis, the more the opportunity are there for people in power to use this to their benefit. So as this crisis is unfolding, there's very powerful people and institutions and entities in the world that are really looking at how this could benefit them. So you're going to, a lot of the changes that we would experience won't really come from the biological virus. A lot of this is going to come from power plays between countries and companies and people who see wealth in this. So it's unlikely that the world is going to be the same. I think we're entering a very different modus operandi on how to do things, how to interact between each other and so forth. So I think it's going to be a very changed world.
Yeah. And this is where you said on our first talk, Derek, that probably the newer developed companies may have a chance to really succeed in this COVID era.
Well, the reset button has been pressed on the economy. So we're currently working with an airline company, the national carrier of eSwatini. And these guys have no debt. They don't have huge overheads. So they now have a chance to compete, internationally with companies that are now struggling to just keep a proper cash flow going. So they could compete with people like Emirates and so forth. So yes, this is an opportunity. We've seen it. I've been watching one internet company called Monday.com. It's basically a project management system which they just zooped up and sold it to the world as running your day-to-day activities. I think their income since the beginning of lockdown was in the vicinity of $150 million. This was a small, unknown company.
Brightwell, over to you. What are your thoughts here? What's your perspective on this pandemic, and where does the future hold for where you're coming from?
Okay, I'm in tax administration, and as you'd understand, we tax income. We tax income, we tax consumption. So where there's low business activity, it means the income will be lower. So the tax collected will be low. And where there's a reduced consumption, it means the consumption taxes will also be low. So in the short term, we are seeing low collections out there. But what I see unfolding over time, is what I would call perhaps rearranging of the deck. There's going to be some readjustments. We can see tech companies becoming big and becoming bigger. We see new industries emerging, because at the basic level, human beings will continue to eat, human beings will continue to talk, human beings will continue to want, to collaborate, to talk to their friends. So those basic needs will continue. The difference is that now human beings will not be able to travel, to see their friends because of potential infection. So we are going to see a rearrangement. Those companies that are going to make those basic things possible will grow big. And over time, we are likely to see the losses of the taxes from the industries that are going down being adjusted. We are likely to see the make-up from those industries that will go up. Because we have seen tech companies, grow, significantly. As Derek said earlier about, was it Monday? Zoom, just a year ago, Zoom, the very organization that provides this platform, was small. It was an unknown player. I remember, Derek, when we had our first conference about a year ago, we're debating whether we should be using Skype or Zoom, and some of us were like, "What is Zoom?" Fast forward, today, if you ask my son, what is Zoom, he will tell you a massive story because he's receiving lessons on Zoom. My daughter the other day was saying she likes cooking. She's 11 years old. Dad, I want to provide lessons on Zoom, provide lessons to other 11-year-olds. Now, under this normal, what are the chances that she'll be saying, I want to go and teach young girls of my age how to cook, how to bake? Zero chance. But now this technology has made it possible. So my assessment is that this is rearranging. It's going to rearrange. Clearly, there are those industries that are going to be seriously affected, but we are going to see new industries coming up and becoming, really big. We are going to see new practices unfold. Life will continue. Life will continue because we are going to adjust. We're going to have to adjust. We're going to have to understand, that I don't need, Derek doesn't need to travel to Swaziland to provide consultancy. He can provide consultancy from where he is, but providing consultancy from where he is, he's going to have to burn, he's not going to burn any fuel, so the environment benefits. But the people who are providing the transport system, who would have provided transport system to get him from Johannesburg to Swaziland are going to lose. But now, those that are going to make it possible for him to deliver his services are going to benefit. So there's going to be some readjustment, in my view. There's going to be some serious readjustment, in the way that we understand life, in the way that, we do business. And also, we are going to see new and significant industries emerge. So that's my view. So I'm optimistic. I'm merely saying there's going to be some readjustment. But, it's not like everything will go flat forever. There will be readjustment and life will continue. But those that will not be able to readjust, they will become extinct. Thank you.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Brightwell. Thanks for sharing your insight there. In fact, I read an article just a couple of days ago that COVID, really expedites the digital transformation process by 7 years. If not, people are always still complacent, being laid back about the need to transform digitally there.
Sarah,
yeah, sure, Derek.
I just want to chip in there to just add to something that Brightwell was saying, and I think that maybe Arvind would also latch onto this. But there's two things that I think that what this COVID is doing, and the one thing is that it's driving us into the arms. Before COVID, we spoke about the fourth industrial revolution, the whole idea of cyber physical systems doing process work that are normally done by humans, and this has been proven by the Industry 4.0 project in Germany, where the German government are now entering a process of what they call dark factories. In other words, there's no lights in the factories because there's no humans in the factory. So, the whole idea of a cyber physical world where things are done online is being expedited by this COVID-19. So again, we're also seeing that, it's the IT, it's the technology companies that are really making a lot of money here. So that's the one thing that's going to happen. I think that there's going to be a huge move towards artificial intelligence. I believe that, you know, if we go back 4,500 years, about 1% of your organization was controlled by process intelligence. You know, there was a guy in a plow and an ox, and that was a process, but it was still a human controlling this. But as Elon Musk has warned us a number of times, is that the time is quickly approaching where we will, you know, systems or artificial intelligence will play a huge role, massive role in organizations. Currently, 65% of the average organization can be run without human intervention. So that's the one thing that's going to happen. But the other thing on a macro level is, back to Orgtology, is that in Orgtology we manage equilibrium. So this was something that was also mentioned by Brightwell, the balance between things. So I think that isolated functioning is going to start disappearing, and that's a good thing. So you're going to have a situation, let's take the kingdom of eSwatini. So eSwatini has a very, very good revenue authority. I know that because I've been working with these guys for 5 years, and they're highly efficient. But their efficiency might kill the country. So, you know, if you have a very efficient revenue authority, but you don't have a system on the other side that's generating the income, then a very efficient revenue authority could kill a country. So I think we're moving into an approach where there's going to be much more holistic view on how to deal with things. So at the same time as you get your revenue authority and your central bank in a company efficient, and your regulators, like your financial regulatory authorities and that type of thing, as the more efficient they become, the more you have to balance the other side of the scale, and that's generating the wealth. And at this stage, the quickest way to generate wealth, especially for a small country like Eswatini, would be technology. They're not going to do it with agriculture or anything like that. We've seen it in Singapore, which is a phenomenal story. So I just wanted to throw those two things in. You know, I think that significant changes that the future would see would be a more holistic approach of balance. That would be the one thing. And the other thing would be we're going to have to submit a lot of the human work to artificial intelligence. And then there's also quite a strong theory in the market that as artificial intelligence increases, the human population will decrease, you know, because there would simply not be a need for so many humans. The population has actually increased in the 18th century with the first industrial revolution. So we're estimating that with this one, it will eventually become decreasing. Yeah, I just wanted to throw that in.
Yeah, if I just may sort of add there as well. So we've seen the threat of what COVID has been done, has done to us, and, you know, pushing us towards digitalization and technology. There's also the opportunity of 5G and what that brings, right? So 5G essentially is going to be completely revolutionary in terms of what we think of technology today, and we think what we have today is advanced. 5G is going to turn that all on its head. You know, everything Derek is talking about, you know, in terms of dark factories, you know, just imagine, you know, smart buildings, you know, with everything automated from its HVAC, lighting, you know, manufacturing, you know, using full-on automation and IoT. 5G essentially is, it makes the current internet that we are using look like what we used to use in the 1990s with the small internet dial-up. You remember that connection, right? Dialing, and, you know, you can't go on the phone, and you know, and one guy can use the internet at that time, and that's what the difference between 4G and 5G is going to bring. So we can't even understand what that's going to bring to that in conjunction with the external environment of the pandemic and social distancing and all that as well. So, you know, and it's so funny. I just wanted to, you know, just to carry on with what Derek and Brightwell were saying. I'm looking at management methodologies. You know, I'm reading up articles and seeing what's out there in the reviews, business journal reviews and everything. And, you know, when they say that, you know, strategists are trying to predict the environment, or the traditional MBA strategies always say you do your analysis, we study the external environment, and we try to make sense of things. The rate of change of which a pandemic is happening in the multiple scenarios that are occurring every day. Russia comes out with a vaccine. You know, does it work? Does it not work? What's the scenario of that happening? Then we've got 100 vaccines being developed at the same time in so many countries around the world. How can we actually take into consideration every factor and think we can have some degree of control? You know, and I think from what I understand of the Orgtology solution, Derek, and maybe you and Brightwell can sort of elaborate about this. From what I've understood, because I'm myself in training to become an Orgtologist, so you know, correct me if I'm wrong. But from what I understand is, because Orgtology operates on the fundamentals of mathematics in an organization, and it operates on these laws, which are basically built down to the bottom process of what constitutes an organization, inputs and outputs, right? And it's able to scale depending on these changes that an environment is going through, okay? That's how you can build true resilience, you know? And I understand from your end as well, Brightwell, you know, that even during this pandemic, you know, your revenue authority was able to operate just as efficiently, you know, without, you know, having too many constraints in the external environment. Am I correct, guys? Do you just, am I on the right, you know, could you just expand on that a bit?
I think Brightwell would be able to give a practical explanation here. From my side, yes, it's exactly as you say, Arvind, and we manage equilibrium. I think what we've done in the past with the traditional approaches is people, let's take risk management, for instance. People would manage the incident. So they would try and isolate an incident and work around working with the prevention or the continuation of business after an incident or before an incident happens. That would be the typical risk approach. From an Orgtology approach, we would go and we would look at the system and we would say to, well, this system, what are the critical success factors for this system to do its work? And then from those critical success factors, we would go and we would establish a balance, an equilibrium. So the equilibrium in an organization is exactly as Brightwell has said. It's about running the business versus changing the business. Now, when you're changing the business, you're not putting bread on the table. You're putting the possibility of bread on the table. So while we build a road, we can't drive on the road. So changing the business is a very risky thing. It's a very dangerous thing. It sort of creates a risk appetite for change. So this equilibrium, instead of managing the incident of a pandemic, or the incident of this, or the incident of that, because that becomes impossible. You can't foresee all incidents as you know, as Arvind has said a bit earlier. But what we can do is we can say, well, in this environment currently as it is, this is the amount of stability that we can contain, and this is the amount of change that we have to bring in. So the more stable environment, the higher the stability level, which means the more energy, resources, people and money and assets you can spend on your processes, your operations, in other words, the things that you repeat. But the more volatile an environment becomes and the more problematic the environment becomes, the more we have to change. So the more strategy needs to be in place. So instead of looking at an incident, and this is not something we thought out. I mean, if you go back to Julius Caesar, who was one of the greatest Roman emperors, he would work like that. I mean, he wouldn't just have set plans on how to do things. He would literally go to a battle, and that environment, you know, the odds of winning, etc., would dictate the amount of change that he has to bring about at that moment. So I think that's a good thing of Orgtology, is that we're constantly managing equilibrium. So any type of thing could come along, and when that thing comes along and it's a problematic thing, we increase the amount of resources we spend on transformation and change, and we decrease the amount of resources that we spend. It's an inverse relationship, because when you running your operations, or when you're executing a strategy, you know, you're using the same people, money, and assets. There's a common resource pool. So that creates an inverse equilibrium between what we do to run the business and what we do to change the business. But I think that people should stop trying to manage events specifically. It's not possible. Obviously, you have to have your hand on that. But, you know, the big thing is to know how much change the organization has to induce at a specific point to still be relevant in the environment, because there's really just two things any company has to do. It has to perform and it has to stay relevant. But I think Brightwell might give a more practical approach to this. So I would like to hear his inputs as well.
Yes, thank you there, colleagues. Well, this COVID pandemic is a very good example here. You know, we've built, you know, our systems or our processes such that they are collecting revenue efficiently. You know, but the traditional method of collecting revenue is to collect the revenue that we see. You know, at the border gate, we tax the goods that we see crossing. You know, we collect our import duties on the goods that we see. You know, locally, we collect consumption taxes from the organizations that we see. And we collect income taxes again from the plants that we see. They would submit their returns. We do audits on all of this that we see. What has COVID done? You know, COVID has, you know, upset or put pressure on physical interactions, on the businesses that require physical interactions. But at the same time, what we're beginning to see is a surge on online businesses. Now, a very, very good system is a system that would, you know, like amoeba. You know, we were trained at business school that the single cell amoeba, the single cell organism called amoeba, is very efficient in that it's able to feed itself, move around, but also it's very flexible, that it's able to adjust with the environment. So with our current processes would be effective for as long as they are able to detect that now business has gone online, right? How do we collect online transactions? Now, if we're unable to collect business activity that occurs online, what's going to happen? The revenues will just keep going down. Then at some point, there won't be much, but it will not necessarily mean there's no business activity out there. Because what COVID has done, and Arvind, you talked about 5G, basically telecommunications, what it has done, it has effectively made the world flat, not like truly flat. I could be sitting here in Swaziland and doing business with an organization that is, you know, that is in Malaysia or Indonesia or Asia or anywhere, right? Now, traditionally, I would get into an aeroplane. Now, as I come through the border, I'll be declaring that this is, you know, the money I'm bringing into the country. But what if I'm sitting here? You know, I'm not going through the border. How will the Revenue Authority get to be aware that I did business somewhere, you know, offshore? So it means our processes have to be such that when they detect that income is in this area, they should be able to readjust and be able to collect, you know, in that area. That is an effective system. So it's the ability to, you know, to do the simple things very well, and the ability to be able to change where there's need to change. You know, be able to detect that the environment that I'm in now requires that I should change. So that's in our view now a practical, you know, scenario of a situation that calls for us to change the way we run our business. But if our processes, if the feedback, our processes are not coordinated and have effective feedback, we'll still be waiting, you know, for people to cross to the border to tell us where they've gone to do business, when in fact they're doing business, you know, from the comfort of their homes, and they're doing business with offshore companies.
Yeah.
So that's my take. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Excellent. I love the analogy on the amoeba, actually. It's amazing.
Yeah. Gentlemen, before we get on to the next questions, I know Brightwell has to make his way through with the Lesotho authorities shortly. But I'm going to ask you this question. Just now you mentioned, before we let you go there, Brightwell, you mentioned that, I mean, you know, I was in Africa for the past 10 years, and I'm pretty well versed with African companies stationed in South Africa. I must say that you hold a position of a digital transformation position there for SRA.
Yes.
It's actually, to be honest with you, it's one of the rare positions that I see in Africa. And that's where I got that SRA is pretty advanced in gauging such transformation. And you mentioned as well earlier that you work top to bottom, working with the leaders first and then filtering it through the culture. What made you, how was it, what was the experience there with you dealing with the leaders? Were they open-minded enough, and how did you fight your way through to make it happen for SRA?
Good question. You know, we started this journey in 2018. We started talking about digital transformation in 2018, you know, and it appeared like IT. You know, it appeared like automation. Digital transformation is not just automation, it's beyond automation. You know, it's changing the way we think and you know, conceptualize a digital business. Let me just make a very simple example. I mean, Derek, when we went to high school, you know, when you are thinking about coaching a woman, you'd go to a CNA to buy a love card, you know, to buy a romantic card, and then you write something on the card, you send it to the girl. Now, if you ask your daughter today, or you don't have a son, I have a son. If I ask my son that if you want to express affection, you know, to a girl, are you going to be thinking about going to buy a card? No. They're not thinking about buying a card. They are thinking about social media. They're thinking about all these fancy things. Now, with digital transformation is not about automation. It's about thinking. It's about thinking in a digital environment. You know, so from 2018, the understanding of colleagues was just about, this is another automation initiative. You know, we want to automate this, want to automate that. You know, fast forward, thanks to COVID-19, because now digital transformation has been seen not as automation. It's seen as doing things differently. It's seen as doing our work to exploit the digital capabilities that you know, that we have. 4 months ago, we were forced to stay at home. It was a lockdown. 4 months ago, around March, April, we were forced to stay home. Luckily, because we had been on this journey for about a year, you know, we were ready. Our digital platforms were ready, you know, for our teams to do their work at home. So they started doing their work. Now imagine an environment where employees are managed on the basis of their supervisors physically, you know, physically looking at them and touching them, you know, and seeing that they're at their duty stations. Now, if these people are going to do work from home, how are you going to ensure that? You will not be going from home to house as a supervisor. No, but you're going to be doing your work, you're going to be doing your supervision. Think differently now. So suddenly right now, the emphasis is about production rather than physical presence in the office. It's about setting targets and then letting the employees supervise themselves because they're in their houses. So digital transformation is about looking at work differently. The one major hurdle that we still have is the organizational structure. You know, because we are used to, you know, grouping by functions. I think Derek is an advocate against this sort of thinking. So we're used to the HR people sitting here, the legal people sitting there. But now, doing our work from the house, you know, from home, it becomes very difficult, you know, because it means each piece of work, this officer does their work, they have to take it to the boss has to authorize, and then before you take it to another department. When in fact, we could rearrange ourselves such that, you know, we rearrange ourselves by process. Good example is a procurement. The procurement department issues a purchase order, and then or a request for proposal. Then legal issues a contract, and then finance pays. Now, if we were to think digitally, those employees will be working together without the need for the supervisors because they are part of the same chain. The product is the same; it's a signed contract. you know. So there's no need to be boxing them according to the department, because when they are in their houses, there's no department anyway. So instead, there's just work, you know. So that's what I found interesting. Actually, someone said, thanks to COVID, the word work has moved from being a noun to the verb that it's supposed to be. Because in the past, work was a noun, work was a building, when in fact work is a verb. You know, work is doing something. So it says COVID has transformed the word work back to being a verb, because we should be focusing on work instead of focusing on structural, convenient structural setup. So, but we are in a transition, thanks to COVID. We're in a transition. We're beginning to see things for what they are. We're beginning to realize that the physical departments and structures are actually the ones that are creating silos. You know, technology is making it possible for us to see work for what it is, to see work as work. So that's and it's a journey. Another good example, you know, we've got service centers around the country. Taxpayers would go to the service center to either submit their returns or to get assistance. Now, social distancing says they should not come to the service center, right? So we've been saying to taxpayers, no, stay at home, use our online platforms. Don't come to us, just submit your returns online. Now, you tell me, what are the service centers going to do now because there's no traffic? You know, the traffic is going online. So what are the service centers around the country going to do? Okay. Now, digitally, if you were to think digitally, it means right now we need to shift our emphasis. Instead of waiting for a customer to walk into the service center, but we should be going onto our online platforms to wait to interact with them there. Okay. And then the working hours. If you are going to avail platforms that are 24/7, it means your working hours will not be 8 to 5, Monday to Friday, right? Because your platforms are 24/7. Your taxpayers will be interacting with you throughout the day and throughout the week. So now it means we need to rearrange ourselves internally. Now, where is the organizational structure there? It's the one that is pulling us down, and the working hours are the ones that are pulling us down. So we are gradually beginning to see, because the pressure is coming from taxpayers. They're saying, okay, look, you know, at midnight yesterday, I had a problem with the system and you guys were sleeping. You know, there was no one available to assist me. So this service of yours now is not effective. So it means thinking digitally again means what? Means we need to rearrange ourselves such that we provide service 24/7. Now, someone would argue that why do you even need human beings to provide that service 24/7? Because you can develop chatbots, right? Develop chatbots to answer, because most of the questions that you guys will ask, a chatbot can answer because they're basic questions. The questions that are complicated are less than 10% of the overall questions that come through. So thinking digitally means basically you can deploy chatbots to answer all those basic questions that taxpayers would ask, and then leave your staff to just deal with the few very complicated questions that are going to come through. You know, so there you go. It's actually very interesting for me, and my colleagues gradually are beginning to, you know, to warm up to this idea that the world that we live in has suddenly become different. It's different. Yeah.
Yeah, it might, and I'm beginning to get used to the new norm. I find the digital world that we are in now has more benefits than it is of a challenge, though we didn't think about that when it first happened, when we were first grounded. But you see, for Africans, what's the hold up? I mean, what do you think they are hesitant to change digitally even before COVID happens? Is it the cost, the pricing, or is it just the mindset?
Well, I think It's mostly the mindset. You know, changing behavior, Sarah. Changing behavior is extremely difficult. So, but I see an acceleration right now. I see us accelerating the transformation. Yeah. Can I stop there, Sarah? I'll just be around for a minute or two, then step out. Thank you.
Not a problem. Thank you, Brightwell, for sharing that.
Thank you.
Just moving over to either Derek or Arvind, please, if you take here. I'd like to understand, you know, I mean, we've got the situation now threatening the world's economic order, you know, causing havoc in industries, the real estate industry, the hospitality industry, retail, transportation, what have you, trading industry, consultation industry, tourism. So many of them are going through unprecedented disruption. Do you think, what do you think organizations could do to build back to the better, if you can delve deeper into the subject matter, navigate during these difficult economic times as they seek to still hold on to their core values, please?
Sarah, can I just chip in before Brightwell leaves? I just want to add to something that he said, and it would also lead to your question here.
Sure.
And you asked about Africa, but I really don't think that that problem of digitalization is only an African problem. Brightwell nailed it when he talked about the current organizational structures that we have, you know, the typical organigram. So if you if you design an organization, you would look at whether this is a functional structure or divisional structure or matrix structure, you know, that type of thing, the old school thinking in terms of how we structure. Now, these structures are all built around human-controlled organizations. So the assumption when you create an organigram is not that you're organizing the resources, the human resources of the organization. It's that you're basically creating an organization. So you would have huge companies like KPMG and the like, and when they do process engineering, you know, they would come into they would literally go to the divisions or the departments, and they would ask HR, you know, what are you doing here? And they would build a process around that. But that's not how systems think. It's exactly like Brightwell explained. You know, a system sees a process. A system sees a flow of activity. A system really sees humans as a resource to a process or to work, to whether the work is repetitive, which we call processes, or non-repetitive, which we call projects. You know, that activity must be resourced by people. So that, I think, is the core problem, and the core problem for organizations to transform digitally is their own structures. Their organigrams are creating their own problems. We will have to move away from that model. There's no ways we could go into a future with that old thinking of, you know, this is a matrix structure or divisional structure. It's simply not how our system works. It latches on exactly to what Brightwell said. So now we have a person working with recruitment and selection. We have a person working with labor relations. We have a person working with performance assessment. And all these people sit in the same department. Why? They're not sitting in the same department because their activity flows in the same process. They're sitting in the same department because they have the same degree. That's really the only reason. So people have studied the same direction, are clustered in the organizations in the same place, which is really ridiculous. It's primitive, to say the least. So when a system develops, it would see that a resource comes into this organization, similar to the human body. I mean, when I eat food, there's not a certain place in my body that deals with liquids and another place that deals with meat. And you know, it goes through one process. So whether you're recruiting a person, or whether you're you know, acquiring an asset like a laptop, or whether you're budgeting, you know, giving money to the organization, it's really the process of giving resources to the system. And I think that's what stops us from automating properly, because we've got this silo idea. So you would have developers developing an HR system. You'll have another group of developers developing a risk management system, and that's really not. I mean, that's actually an insult to artificial intelligence. You know, Arvind spoke about G5 technology. He's absolutely, I agree so much with his point there. Now, I speak under correction, but I've read somewhere that G5 technology can process at a trillion bits per second. The average human processes at 10 bits per second. Now, I mean, 10 bits per second compared to a trillion bits per second. That means that if you're an artificial intelligence system, you would be able to comprehend every face on Facebook, every political view, every joke, every argument, every viewpoint within a few weeks.
Derek, let me just give you a bit of just to elaborate, just to give you a picture of what you're saying. What is the most personal thing we as human beings can go through? One of the most personal things that any one of us would probably go through is a surgery of some kind, all right? A medical surgery. When you see your doctor, you expect some degree of closeness, right? And if somebody's going to be performing surgery on you, that is something which, you know, we would never assume can be done remotely. Last year, China did its first remote surgery using 5G technology, end of 2019, as a test. What they're showing is that down the line, okay, you would be able to get a medical surgeon from Norway, and through 5G technology and the bandwidth that it can carry and the robotics that are enabled in a remote location anywhere in the world, you could get a doctor from Norway to do surgery on someone from India. Okay, so can you imagine? You know, that's the kind of revolution that we're looking at. And I don't even want to talk about 6G, which is by 2028, which is what Samsung is working on right now. And there's already research going out there and what they are capable of doing. So we don't even want to go 8 years from where we are at 6G. We're just talking 5G, which is already, you know, visceral right now. You know, yeah. So I just wanted to sort of just expound on what really that means when Derek's talking about the trillions of bits of information that are coming through at one moment.
Thanks, Arvind. Thanks, Derek, for sharing that. It's beautiful insight here.
Yeah. You know, I just want to say one thing about, just to elaborate a bit about what Derek was saying about it not being an African-related problem. It's very true. In fact, it is definitely going to be an Asian-related problem. Now, from what I've seen here in Asia, it is not that Asians are not averse to technology. We are very strong in adapting technology. We're one of the fastest tech adopters in the world, you know, in terms of our receptiveness towards technology. Where the problem comes in, okay, in us sort of applying these ecology principles, or where I feel the gap in, is in terms of our embedded and encoded upbringing on how the world and the business world works. We in Asia have these years of sort of programming about, if I've worked 25 years in HR, that means that's all I'm operating on. That paradigm is all I'm operating on. If I'm a CFO or financial controller, you know, I belong in the finance department. It's that and then the hierarchy, the hierarchy of reporting lines, and that that fear of extroversion, personality wise, and the ability to be willing for individuals to adopt and take on risk individually in an organization. Like, I'll give you a simple example. Junior people, we spoke, Brightwell spoke about the process of getting a signed contract and how previously you need to go through higher management and get it signed off and things like that. You know, if you see, if someone very junior was to take on that responsibility, that the final contract would lie in him, but actually it's not really in him, it's embedded in the process. It's a systemic intelligence of what Orgtology is saying. But just that psychological fear that, oh, I've got a 15 million contract and I must make sure it's, you know, it's 100% proof, and you know, that fear. So that's the psychological encoding that I think would be the obstacle in terms of educating Asians, you know, to really rethink about businesses. From what I've seen, from most of the people I'm speaking to, from what clients I'm looking at and all of that, everyone is praying for things to go back to normal as how they once were. They're still trying to maintain some degree of status quo. And that's, I think, the biggest obstacle. We need to eliminate the idea that, you know, things are going to be the same as how they were before. And how, you know, what Derek was responding about in terms of the how we can manage we can change and we can adapt, to circumstances as they arise, that is very, very, very key. Instead of trying to seek some form of stability in the external world, we should seek stability in our own inherent processes, in what Orgtology calls the intelligence in our systems. That's what's going to keep us relevant. That's what's going to keep us and help us survive, not hope in something external. And if Brightwell said an amoeba completely adapts to its situation and it's able to mold according to the situation. Now, that capability of becoming an amoeba like that is what's going to keep us relevant, going to keep us and make us survive, instead of always trying to look for some saving grace in the form of a vaccine. Look, 100 vaccines, the experts are saying that even the efficacy of a vaccine is subject to change every 6 months due to mutation. So even coming up with the first vaccine is one challenge. The clinical trials are not long enough. They're cutting short the process. We don't know what the side effects are, under such short duration. And this is not, this is from proper medical science. And the multiple strains that will emerge from each and every vaccine. So what's the point really in holding, putting that on a holy pedestal, instead of looking at ourselves and looking at what we can do to build our own, it's quite interestingly, microcosmically, our own immune system on a health basis. And from a business perspective, the immune systems of our companies, which is essentially what the resilience of an Orgtology perspective would bring. I think that's the challenge that actually we in Asia face, actually.
That's a very valid point, Arvind. And you know what? Since like you, when I got back to Malaysian grounds, I started doing research about all these issues during COVID time. It gives a lot of us the time to relook at our forward strategies. And it's so interesting. There are actually gaps that we can fill up in the industry that we are in, only if you have that creative thinking within you, isn't it? That design thinking within you, that willingness to, your fighting spirit, your resiliency, just being different from the rest. Yeah, and I agree completely with you. It's really on the mindset of changing towards the new era.
Yeah, and I think that is also what Derek and I we're basically bringing to this part of the world. We see that it's really driven by a mission to see all of us through this current challenge and in future challenges as well. I'll just give a simple example in terms of a real life situation, right? So the Taliban in Afghanistan, the US have pulled out of Afghanistan, right? Essentially, they've lost the cause. And if you look at the resilience and you look at the technology that the Taliban use essentially to get out of that situation, if you look at what they've been using, they've still been using a simple AK-47, whereas America was using high-level drones and all kinds of insane technology to basically win a war. But what they could not essentially overcome is the complexities in that environment, and so the Afghani people having been in such a challenging situation for decades, they've already have an inbuilt resilience towards fighting oppression. And it's so inbuilt, it's implied intelligence that is there. And, it's brought down empires, so now Afghanistan is called the graveyard of empires, from the point of even at the time of the Greeks and things like that, all the way down to Russia and the US and things like that. And that's because of a deep implied intelligence in terms of fighting off a foreign invader. In the same way, that degree of resilience, in a way, of course, whatever said and done politically, that's a separate issue, but it's about every company, every organization building its own inner resilience to adapt and to fight whatever an external environment brings into it. So we as businesses as well, do we have that implied way of the implied intelligence in our systems? Do we have the mindset embedded in our culture, in our work processes, and our people to think like that? To think that I'm not, just because I did a degree in accounting, as Derek says, I sit in a finance department, but actually look at myself as an individual that's bringing energy and intelligence to support what the mission of the organization is trying to achieve, and looking at myself as a resource instead of as what did my degree say about me, or what does my upbringing say about me, or, and get rid of that mindset, and this is, I mean, I'm an MBA holder as well. So, it's coming from someone who's gone through the due process and seeing that it is really a time for a revolutionary change in the way we look at systems, we look at human beings, we look at inputs and outputs, and we reframe the business environment.
Okay. Great sharing, Arvind. Now I'm going to ask each of you personally, based on what your industries are, your expertise are, your business scope. How has it been since the transformation, since the MCO? How has AI helped you during this era? Your thoughts here. Has it affected you? Have you benefited from it? What do you think?
Derek, you want to go first?
Sarah, from my side, it's been very difficult. We've seen this coming, and it wasn't a surprise. I mean, I've already predicted these things. I've been on the phone with Arvind a few times before we even had a lockdown, and we talked about this. And I mean, there's nothing which we predicted then that has changed now. It's really happened quite faster than we thought, actually. And so understanding this before it happens didn't really help much, because the industry didn't wake up. The industry is only waking up now. So companies are now realizing, but the organizations have to continue. We have to train people. We have to consult. And there was really a 4-month period that we weren't able to really work, because clients just thought that this is going to be there was this perception that it's in the hands of politicians. So a politician can say, well, okay, lockdown open, lockdown close, but the virus seems to have its own agenda, and it seems to have its own timelines and due dates and stuff like that. I mean, I look at New Zealand, my brother lives there, and it's been clean, but now they've got 100 cases again, so they're already going into the second wave. And it's really been difficult, but I must tell you that it's also been very beneficial. We've been able to rethink things. We're from now on, if a client phones me from any place in the planet and asks me to come and consult there, I would tell them that, but we can do this online. I've been in the lockdown period, I've been through about 3 or 4 successful consulting projects, in fact, working better than going on site, because here you can plan your time and manage your resources more efficiently. So I think the industries, it's the normal process, there's denial first, and then there's bargaining, and then there's acceptance and so forth. That normal process really goes through the industry. So the industry was first in denial, and now it's into a phase of acceptance. So I think things are getting better. I've seen a lot of people dropping out. A lot of people in my industry, I mean, there's even some people in my industry now selling houses and cars and stuff like that, because they can't make it here. So a few of us have been managed to scrape through. We're not making what we used to make. The income has declined by 4-fold. So it's a different world, but we're waking up to it. There's a new consciousness now. There's a new idea of how to do things. We sorting out our online skills, and we're having a bigger online presence. So yeah, I think there's been good and bad. And I agree with what the other people have been saying so far, is that it's a new world. It's new rules. It's new processes. But it's affected us definitely in quite a hard way. It would be interesting to hear Arvind's views on this.
Yeah. So, from my perspective, it's the same thing. We are looking at, since the pandemic struck, trying to stay relevant. Obviously, first and foremost, your traditional lines of service completely disrupted. So if you're doing training, you're doing coaching, for example, and companies are restructuring their organizations, you know, essentially that's a no-go. I was a bit, I mean, Performatize has been a bit more advanced in the sense that we've already went into micro-learning management systems and AI inbuilt into our learning management systems at the time, more than 2 years ago, when we started in that direction. So there has been a bit of a pickup in that segment of the industry. However, it's still obviously, because it's dependent on human capital, and if the industries are subject to disruption, the human capital efforts are also subject to disruption, and therefore learning technology is also affected by that. And well, in terms of what we've been doing, essentially, it's that fine balance between doing operationally what we can to ensure sustenance and continuity of our businesses, and at the same time staying on top of things to keep ourselves relevant. So it's a fine balance, as Derek mentioned, before. You can't really do both if you have limited resources. You know, we can't keep trying to innovate and come up with new products. At the same time, we have to pay our bills, and we have to launch some services, you know, or whatever the current industry is requiring from us, you know. So it's that fine line right now. But, you know, at the end of the day, I think the mission is, at least from my side, is to really support and give clarity to businesses about what they really need, you know, instead of what they think they need. And that, I think, is an evangelical mission, which is, it's an exciting one, but it's a challenging one, at least at this stage. So that's what pretty much where I'm at. And it's an interesting journey, exciting journey. And yeah, that's what's happening.
Right. Interesting. So what are your thoughts on the, you know, what's your take on what really organizations should do between now and end of 2021? I know, Derek, when MCO started to take place in March, you told me that we should immediately go online. Everything must be shifted right now. Or was it early part of this year? And I took you for granted, you know, I didn't take you seriously because I guess we was all still in a shock. So you knew what to do between then till now, but now that we are here, what is your take about what should organizations do moving forward till maybe next year?
Sarah, as we've discussed before, I think that the world is moving into two types of economies now. It's going to be, you're going to have to make a choice to either be incredibly localized or incredibly international. And the international option would be online. So we're looking at two worlds where there's a world without borders, like Brightwell said, a flat world, where we could work with companies in Malaysia, we could work with companies in Germany, we could have consulting teams. We're currently putting together a consulting team where there's people from the United States, people from Europe, people from Asia, people from Africa. So we could give services around the clock. And I think that's the opportunity that COVID-19 presents, is that you can now really become a global player. The other option is to be incredibly localized. So that would be the person making shoes or garden services, or, you know, servicing the community and being part of that community, negotiating a position in your community. You're going to either have to negotiate that position locally, or you're going to have to negotiate it, excuse me, internationally. You know, these days when somebody coughs, there's immediate, you know, you start worrying.
Happens all the time. I'm
yeah.
with you.
So yeah, this is where we're going, I think, and I think that both would have its benefits and its drawbacks. Obviously, the competition on international level is going to be immense. We saw powerful companies like Skype being bought for $8 billion and now practically worthless. I mean, things like Zoom have come in and Microsoft Teams have come in, and so the competition on the digital platform is going to be immense. With the 5G technology coming out, with the possibility of a fifth industrial revolution, I think the role of artificial intelligence is going to become immense. Elon Musk even predicts a point where we will have to negotiate with systems. You know, you won't just be able to use them. The advantage that artificial intelligence has, it's collective. It's one, you know, they call it a singularity because it's one thing. So AI wouldn't necessarily see itself as part of this company or this government or that government. You know, that's another problem that we're facing. So I agree with Arvind. It's a very interesting future. I think my choice is to be online, to negotiate internationally and not, you know, give a local service. It's been like that before before COVID. I mean, I worked internationally. I worked across the borders. So I think that's what the future holds. It's going to be an interesting future. We're going to have to collaborate more. We have to break the boundaries of tradition a bit more. You know, if you're going to operate internationally, like here today, I mean, you had somebody from Africa, you had a European person, an Indian person, a Malaysian person, and we're all talking about the same problem at the same time. So yeah. it's going to be an interesting
future. Which never can be done before if you're on especially if you're a startup, looking at the cost and everything to fly everybody together, that's going to be very expensive, and now it's really costless.
Yeah, you know, just one thing also, you know, you mentioned, Sarah, about, you know, if I was to say, what would a business do from now to 2020, and, you know, and you said, well, obviously go online. I'll be honest with you. My perspective is getting online is not the resolution or the solution for all your business problems. You know, when I saw this happening, and I've been in touch with a lot of businesses, small businesses, medium businesses, large businesses, and just shifting online. Some companies have the capability to do it and to do it well. Some companies, like a gym, okay, I saw gyms start shifting online, running online classes. And if you ask me, that is not a solution. That's not a long-term solution for that specific business. So it's really important to get back to the fundamentals of what is it that's going to help you stay relevant, and that is in terms of delivering value towards your end user, right? The end result. So just going online, being online is the medium, okay, that keeps you what do you call that, relevant in terms of people can find you. But if your core product or your service can't deliver the same value as what was once being done face to face, you really need to rethink that, you know. And I think that's where we have some tools in the Orgtology toolkit, where basically these models can be used to essentially help companies refine and really find that niche that will help keep them keep them relevant, like the EOP analysis and stuff, right, Derek?
No, absolutely, Arvind. I think you've nailed it there, you know, and it once again gets back to we have to decide where we want to play. But I agree with Arvind absolutely in terms of the basics. We need to get back to the basics. And this is the same advice I would give to organization before COVID, after COVID, you know. It's the basics. An organization begins with two important components: purpose and intent. The purpose is basically negotiating your way into an industry. So if I'm a boxer, for instance, then I box. There's no difference between what I do and a boxer does in Malaysia or a boxer does in the United States or wherever the case may be. You know, we box. That's our purpose. But where you take this, to what level you take this boxing? Do you want to become Floyd Mayweather or Mike Tyson? That's an intent. So we have to marriage there needs to be a marriage between these two concepts. When you define your purpose, you ignite processes. So your purpose becomes the parent of all repetitive activity within the organization. So all work that is repeated is born from a purpose of the organization. That's an industry specific thing. Your intent is more individual. That's where, you know, if we want to talk, Arvind spoke earlier about mutation. You know, if we want to talk about Darwinian evolution, then the mutation in organizational settings comes from intent. It's the disruption it comes from your desire, what you want to see in the future, not what you want to repeat from the past. So you've got on the one side of this duality, you've got purpose, which brings about processes. And on the other side of this duality, you have intent, which is an articulation of how you want to mold this organization into the future. That becomes your strategy, and your purpose becomes your operation. So that's the beginning of anything. And once you start managing this equilibrium, as I've seen with Brightwell and his team, you know, how easily they've gotten through this pandemic, or still going through this pandemic. I mean, eSwatini is only beginning with this now. You know, each country has its own pace. But they're seamlessly going through this because their organization is driven by purpose. So they don't cluster the organization in terms of the old structures, you know, HR and finance and that type of thing. They cluster it according to purpose. So they would have different systems running, one for resources, one for core business, one for relationships, one for customers and so forth, one for risk. So this is the beginning of what organizations should do. I just wanted to mention a bit earlier that what's going to happen in future, I think, is we don't, you know, we realize that there's humans and there's animals. We make this distinction, and it's almost like a internalized distinction. You know, if I go to a person and I say, you know, I'm a human and that dog is an animal, you know, nobody would ask, why are you saying this? It's a clear distinction. But very few people have ever been able to explain what exactly is the distinction. How are we distinct from animals? Mostly it's a religious view that distincts us. But I mean, biologically, your body works similar to a dog's body. I mean, you've got a brain, you've got lungs, you've got a stomach. You know, if I take the physiology of a chimpanzee, it's really very close to me. I can see the resemblance. My fingerprints, it's got, you know, it's the same 5 fingers, 5 toes. So the distinction really, from an orgtology perspective, between what we do in organizations and what natural systems do is really in the concept of the ability to organize an organization. Organizations, if you take organizations away from humanity, if we take that away, then humans would become primitive. They would live in caves and be animals again. So the ability to organize into teams, into systems, to have intent, I mean, that is a very intelligent, unique ability. So we have to keep the organizations alive. And I think what's going to happen in future is especially when it comes to organizational consulting of strategy and the stuff that we've been talking about here, that's not going to be a local economy. It would be at utmost stupidity to put the hands of your organization into people who focus on a local economy, because organizations, the boundaries between organizations are becoming so blurred. You don't even know what the organization is anymore. You know, it's not like the old days where there was an internal and an external. I mean, you know, you guys, I've worked with you guys for many years. Sarah, when you were still a manager at Marcus Evans, we were part of a team. I was part of your organization. I wasn't on your payroll, but I was part of your organization. And so we're moving into a world where the boundaries are going to be incredibly blurred. You could have people from all over the world, you know, participating, and you would want your consultants and your consulting services to also be international. I think that's the big thing here. Is we have to ask, and I think Arvind basically said it beautifully when he said that the question is not what organizations think they want or need. It's what they really need. And for that, you would need expert services. So I think the consulting industry is really going to boom in future. I think consultants are going to become people who advise globally. You know, I can't see, except if you're a very small organization and you want some, you know, we also separate in consulting, different consultants. You have consultants working with the big picture, strategy and organizational design and that type of thing. And then you have consultants working with the smaller components like human resources and that type of finance. And those would be more local. But I think the decision between local or international is going to become a more pressurized one.
Thank you for sharing that, Derek. Now, last but not least, I know we've some sort answered the question here, but I was going to ask you and your thoughts about the hot speculation, whether we are now in the bull market, or, you know, are we diving deeper to financial Armageddon here, really? If you have anything, any additional thoughts that you wanted to add up to the subject?
Malaysia's GDP just plunged 17%. You know, this is it was a worse than expected contraction since this was just announced last week. You know, you know, it's pretty much, sorry, what last week? Today, sorry, and it's pretty much a disaster. From a GDP standpoint, from an economic standpoint, it's going to be a bull market for very few industries. You know, it's not for the industry as a whole, but for several high growth industries like tech, the ones that we spoke about. But just generally speaking, it's not good. You know, that's my take on it. At the end of it, you know, at least for the near term.
Derek?
Yeah, I agree with Arvind on that.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we don't want to scare people out. I mean, we do, obviously, that gives us a scope on, you know, perhaps where we need to focus on from here. But I personally think if you do have a that resiliency mindset within you, you'll go very far. It's all
See,
about
Sarah, what we need to be, what every organization needs to be now, including individuals, consultants, small businesses, large businesses, we need to turn into, you know, if you've heard of a tardigrade, I don't know if you've heard of a tardigrade. A tardigrade is the world's smallest and most resilient life form, right? So it exists in volcanoes, it exists in hot springs, it exists in the coldest outreaches of outer space. And it lives without oxygen. It's able to adapt. It's the most intensely resilient organism out there. You should just read up about it when you're free. And if you look at the most resilient life forms on the planet, okay, its ability to blend into its environment, its ability to use resources that are commonly not used and to turn it into energy. To ensure its longevity, that's what actually makes these beings survive. The dinosaurs died out for a very clear reason. They were too large, they were too big, they were too slow. And as time went on and evolved, smaller animals that were more adaptive, that could live on land or on sea, that could rely on less oxygen, less resource to ensure sustainability of their biological beings, that's what survived. Take that as an analogy for us as individuals and us as businesses as well. What's going to determine our success is exactly that ability to completely adapt and evolve as these times go on.
Well, thank you so much, Arvind, Derek. I think that wraps up our session today. You know, for today's episode, I'm very pleased that we made it pretty fiery and it's free, and I think it's quite the most honest discussion. Unfortunately, Brightwell had to leave a little bit sooner, but thanks for being such a great sport.
And Sarah, just before we begin, we leave, also just to any of your audience members who are looking for solutions in terms of business resilience and basically organizational design, and looking at completely rebuilding and ensuring that they become that what do you call that resilient entity that we spoke about. Well, that's where the Orgtology line of services and consulting would actually play a role, and they can always reach out to Derek or myself with any interest on that.
Definitely, thank you. I saw that. Lovely, thanks, Arvind. So yes, so for our viewers, you know, we would like to thank you for taking time to watch us till the end. Hopefully the sharing of knowledge is very relevant towards your current economic conditions, and we wish you the best. So please stay tuned for my next round of virtual panel discussion on corporate bullies in the women's world. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you for this great initiative. It's excellent.